Well, uh, this this is working. Is this as in a question? Is this working? I hope so. Uh, test probably. Yeah. It's fine. It's fine. We are we are doing it. Uh, so man, what a crazy day. I guess it hasn't ended actually. So crazy. Anyways, here we are. No, shh. I misclicked. You didn't see that. Uh, I was trying to change statements. Yeah. What? They changed the way in which they typed out a new wake up. A new bottom message has just dropped. Wow. Also, wait. Wow. Yeah, I think I should probably increase the timer, something along those lines, mostly because I think it's good to try and wait. I don't know. I don't actually know. I guess what if we do something like instead of 300. Now this one reaches zero. Okay, and after that I change it so that it properly contains enough time. How much? I think it's like 480 seconds or so. 8 minutes basically. Eight. What if it is eight and a half? It will be even better. But no, I think with eight we are fine. The point is, I remember I used to try and do that before. It's a custom that you wait for ads to be over. Otherwise, it's annoying. It's it's a disturbance of sorts. So let me see. if I change something here, do you see it? Yeah. 80 and then 480. Okay, there it is. Those are 8 minutes. So by the time that there we are, by for next round, I guess something like that. Tomorrow, probably. I don't know. We have to see. I don't actually know. I think I have an idea in terms of I want to do something like test some software tomorrow, but at the same time, what I want to do doesn't always mean that I actually have the capacity to do that in terms of PC and such. And in this case, I think the issue is not having enough USB ports. So, anyways, besides the point, here we are. Good evening. Good evening. Today we find ourselves yet again gathered here. I have been thinking about it, and I think something funny is I I used to not understand why teachers were so tired so often, but yeah, I think that once you slowly grow up and learn to continuously be utilizing your energies in something, you find out that actually, yeah, it makes sense. You end up at not let's say it like this, you are always to some degree tired, not that you are in incapacitated, but you do have some extra weight on you, so to speak. It's like, I don't know, carrying 5 kilos extra every day. That's what it feels like. But at the same time, it's something so distributed over the whole body that it's bearable. Anyways, we're not here to talk about that today. Today we find ourselves gathered for finally something that I have been sort of anticipating for so long. We are finally continuing with the books and what's not, and more than anything else, with so to speak, processing all the stuff that I had already written down before, so that we can, I wouldn't say follow a path. There is always a path, even if it is a lot more invisible or more, so to speak, in the air. There is always something that we are following. It's not like we come here without actually. Ah, wait, I forgot to unplug the mouse yet again. There it is. Thank you. Now we actually started. I was trying to say, yeah, I, I think that there are always things like us trying to some degree to basically, I guess we can say something along the lines of find not just an idea, but rather a form of a concept that we can follow. The difference is having or visiting something that is, in this case, already detailed and that has already sort of been thought about before, and that makes the whole process easier. So, anyways, without so much meta commentary, let me actually start. Today, what do we have in store for today? We, as always, I think the sweet spot is in something like 3 different topics. As always, I slowly understand it a little bit more since the overarching ideas are both in different ways. Things that are related to the human essence and whatnot, it's unavoidable that most, if not all of them, end up always interconnected in some manner. So, yeah, 3 things to also include an extra, I would say, conclusion, probably. That's also useful, like in this concept of creating a synthesis or a further development of what the 3 ideas in themselves are. to unionize them and to be capable of extrapolating from that initial form of the knowledge, something else is in that at that point enough. So yeah, with three we are good basically. And today, now properly, what do we have in store? We have three things: inaction, wishes, and the final one. I have already defined myself. I think it works the best. The final one is not the one contained in the title, but in the other title. I don't want to also create a sort of what? How do you say it? Those phrases that you repeat for some reason, even though you're not obliged. Not a catchphrase, but like a amulet is what we call it on Spanish. So I don't know. This thing of basically always repeating the same concept or not concept, the exact same script, following the script of, oh wow, yeah, we have the title and then we have the title within the stream that is above my head and me being the guy that you see that talks and blah 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 blah. You can understand that is the idea. I guess it becomes self-evident at some point that that is also something that we're going to be talking about. If it is an understandable thing, if it is something that I have actually delineated, it is something that we're going to be talking about also. So yeah, the last concept is everlasting tools. From those three, we have to finish, I guess, in I don't know. I was thinking about it, like probably we can make them deep enough without having to utilize so much time. So I guess if everything goes well, this should be like an hour and a half or so. That's my aim. And yeah, something else? No, I don't think that much more to add. Actually, it's. I think we can actually start talking about this stuff. So yeah, probably, yeah, I don't know. I have to define myself in terms of what we're going to do tomorrow and such, but that is my own problem, I guess. So, anyways, let me let me actually begin, I guess. Um, it could wait. I think it could be useful to have something like three main topics being discussed and signaling them with something like a. I wouldn't exactly say an arrow, but something along those lines. That could be useful to know where we are, probably. That could be more intuitive. At the same time, it's also, I do enjoy my my stuff demanding in terms of, oh wow, yeah, are we actually following the plot? Was there a switch? Yes, but can I have a visual cue about when the switch of topics happened? Maybe it's not so necessary. If you're kidding, that's enough. Anyways, sorry, let me start. I I guess it's in a way it's the essence of the thing that we're beginning with the concept itself of inaction. I had when yeah I somehow I remember the story is a little bit longer. It has been always something that I have thought out in different ways, and when I wrote this one down, it was like I don't know a year and a half ago or so, bro. I don't think that's 2 years ago, but a long time ago it was that first page. I haven't even finished that first one, so yeah, we're still there in terms of development and such. And something funny was that so back in time, this one was one of those decided ideas, and nowadays it is still so popular in many aspects. I think, luckily enough, yeah, inaction has become a little bit more of a mainstream notion of an an, aw- an awareness within societies and more importantly within individuals. So yeah, it has been quite fun to see that it ended up not being something so utterly distant, so utterly connected from all the rest of what we talk about here. What I do think is still, it's fun. It's very fun. And in this case, something like this in action, I don't know, I don't want to make a very basic description besides the one right now, because to some degree we sort of already understand what is inaction and what it means, the incapacity to be capable of utilizing our time in the stuff that we know should be utilized for the sake of action is the most normal concept of inaction, and not just how it exists as something along those lines, but also on the other level of there is not only inaction, but also there is this issue of wow, mm, I am in more modern terms, so to speak, it can be categorized as any sort of day in which I am not being productive. I might have been just procrastinating. That's the most normalized, popular way of referring to stuff of this sort. And yeah, that is basic enough. But at the same time, it's not something that we absolutely require so much time to try and to be observing. In a way, it's already understandable enough. Most people gets that, yeah, I have stuff that I want to actually solve. I have stuff that I want to actually do, that I want to work on, and what happens when I am interested in all of that is that I end up realizing something very funny. That is, not always can I actually thoroughly commit myself to exploring anything of that sort. Not always can I do things that I want. Not always can I take action. The most basic level of the expression. And the reasons, to some degree, are not so easy to identify in the general sense. It always lays in the hand of the person. Okay, why can't I actually do what I want? In that sense, if something ends up being perceived as that procrastination, unavoidably there is a degree of awareness that has to do not just with the quote unquote inaction itself, but also with the personal story, the process of getting to understand the process, and I wouldn't say eliminate, I guess integrate all of that which causes in any manner troubles for us, so that we end up then finally somehow not acting like we know we should. Okay, that is understandable enough, and there is much more being stated out there, or that has already been stated, sorry, which we could identify as great sources for that sort of inaction, that most basic level of inaction, and that to some degree I have even myself utilized time to try and explore all of those ideas. At the end of the day, inaction is in itself something incredibly useful to be capable of being aware of. It is to not understand that one procrastinates is to not be capable of actually, in a society in which we are requested to be trying our best, to lose on the potential capacities that we possess for dealing with the world. And sadly, in that case, it's not something about being more and more demanding with our own being, but just being realistic enough. I do want to live a better life, therefore I will try to see what is it that I might identify as any sort of inactivity, of lack of something else, and how can I try after that to fix it. And that becomes a simple enough eternally repeating pattern, so to speak, something that I always am working on the moment in which I realize, okay, I have this new task to do, and yet again I find myself, I don't know, distracting my own self with something like the phone and such. That's basic enough. That's an understandable enough idea. Most people has gone through that. It doesn't require that much of a thesis in any way. It's not something so complicated in a way. It's the normal thing of, yeah, you know what? I have stuff that I want to do, I have stuff that I am trying to do, yet for different reasons, I end up not being capable of doing it. In other modes of sort of conjugating the idea, you can say, oh yeah, it is impotence, the capacity to not perform as much as I want, which leads me to a different sort of inaction. All of those things refer to a more internal phenomena, and that is, in a way, complicated. On the other hand, it doesn't mean that it is never an explainable thing. It's not like out of nowhere somebody becomes inactive just because. No, it's along the lines of I cannot personally be capable of identifying why do certain things end up in this area, in this domain of inaction, of lack of activity, of stuff of that sort. And because I can identify that at the very least, then I realize I might want to see a little bit more about everything else. Okay, not only do I see, not only do I face, so to speak, these things that are related to how I feel and how I think about the way in which I want to go about my own life, but also I have the possibility of exploring all the other aspects that might be a possible issue, and having all the already existing scenarios in which in the past I found myself there. That is something, the expression itself that I was trying to utilize for this whole, I don't know, 5, 6 sentences has been all of this lies in the domain of a personal experience and an internal process of identifying how that happens. There is not so much of a of an actual tool that can be forced onto your hands. It's something along the lines of, it's not just a revelation, it's an actual receival of the idea. If I don't want to see sometimes that I am not acting, that I am not doing, that I am not being the way in which I want, I can't actually just hear that from the outside. There are, I don't know, that is my own method. I do understand that there are things like, oh yeah, we are all forced to confrontation and we are all, in some way or another, always sort of inclined towards those instances in which we end up actually, truly realizing if things are or not the way in which we think they are. And if the thesis that we have constructed about the world actually in the world itself, in the reality, keep up with what we tried to predict. So I don't know. I am I'm I have said that recently, and I think it's a certain enough quote, so to speak. I don't think that being the accuser is so useful. So where is the other direction that we can take this on? What is the other aspect of inaction that is interesting? Because, once again, that is a basic enough definition that we can then finally understand and sort of dissect. There is, I think, it's something that you see once you are around, so to speak, how we tend to damage the different words that we utilize, the different ideas that are behind the stuff that we are trying to talk about. not for the sake of actually showing that they were always wrong, but it's more along the lines of sometimes for hidden second intentions, not an honest action of, oh yeah, you know what, we have to realize that everything that isn't related to us doing the thing which we desire the most might be in action. Okay, that can be logically constructed into what could seem to be a reasonable argument. On one hand, on the other one, there is also the reality of sometimes it's much preferable to not have movement, to not have stuff happening, than to have any kind of negative experience going on. Something that most people learn throughout the process of repetition in life is wow, I actually don't want to, I don't know, have such a hard time every single day of my life because I choose to constantly discuss stuff with people who are not capable of understanding what I'm trying to talk about, you know? I don't have to bother myself with doing things, and the acceptance of those kinds of quote unquote surrenders, of those conceits that we slowly have in the world, could be then, yes, called inaction. Oh yeah, you know, the world is a magical place in which you are capable of doing whichever you want. And if you decide to just focus on yourself for the sake of your own existence rather than to try and help the rest, I don't know, that is too much of a I am, rather than doing anything, honestly, I am casting my own judgment on what the experiences are. I am this basic concept of making moral judgments and assumptions. And sometimes it's useful to be able of in this case, this is the source of this topic today. Sometimes it's nice to not to do stuff. Sometimes it becomes a useful tool actually to learn how to also have nothing going on. It's I have mentioned that before and there are different sort of titles, so to speak. This idea of, you know what, we need to also have active rest. I need to be engaged in the process of breathing, of taking up taking some revolutions off of my own inner motor, you know? I need to consciously do some stuff. And sometimes it is only through inaction that I can achieve that. I can't, I don't know, go into focus mode every single day of my life and find myself in the process in the process of meditating. Not everybody gets to do that. And something that can be a little bit more accessible is something not so distant. The reality of, you know what? I can actually sit down, try to consume something that doesn't mean anything to me, that doesn't contribute towards my own existence, and through that, through something that might be a lot more passive than what I can actually admit, I also get to find myself in that place of inaction that does lead to some better sensations in my own life later on. It is to live a completely agitated life is not only stressful from the outside but also damaging. To only be in the highest point of existence during the whole of our own existence is in some ways even a torture of sorts. It's not so good to have such a vibrant with sensations alive. It's sadly the human isn't capable of 24/7 withstanding all that the world has to offer. There is a reason why we talk about prudency and having limits and understanding where Is it that we have had enough and such? And sometimes when that isn't moving in our favor, it's necessary to revisit what we had already thought was completely understood, because that's what I was trying to mention. We find that sometimes we also, in this case, we are talking about inaction, in that, in the essence of the thought itself, we end up imposing many other assumptions and presumptions that might not at all relate, at the very least, with the idea which we can identify is true, which we can identify is honest and is the correct one, so to speak. And when something along those lines happens, the most understandable reaction is, I can, I, it's not something bad. I actually can calm down. I actually can organize myself, and I actually can also find out about which is it that I need. But in this case, my proposition was, and this doesn't get to happen if I don't understand that I also need to have less activity, to have less intensity, to have more calmness in my own existence. And we, I guess it's not such a distant topic that can be in itself a whole discussion. But yeah, it's the weaponization of knowledge that ends up making, oh yeah, you know what? Inaction is always bad. It cannot be eternally bad. I started this discussion with that. There are times in which it is far better to do nothing than to do something harshly and end up with even worse consequences. There are, even in video games themselves, can serve to illustrate many ideas. There are times in which it is better to just pass your turn instead of risking everything for something that will end up putting you in an even worse and more disadvantageous position, you know? And that concept applies to, so to speak, the game of life. It's not so crazy to say, yeah, sometimes we need to have nothing. There are other occasions in which, yeah, unavoidably, to have action is to survive, and to do something is to be capable of continuing in this, in some ways, eternal struggle, so to speak. But at the same time, to lose alter reality of, I don't know, I don't have the capacity to to living my life to do the maximum speed possible. I can't do that. And there is a sort of related concept I remember that has to do with, and something funnier happens with, once you get to normalize inaction, once you get to normalize those moments of calmness, you find those other, so to speak, processes that come along that. Because, in a way, I always try to talk about it in a very simple manner. I don't like to uh, utilize the soup of terms that can exist, but that doesn't need to actually be always utilized, you know? And in this case, yeah, we can say it on the other manner just to try and get it a little bit more clear what I'm trying to refer to. There are incredibly beneficial consequences of including those moments of inaction purposefully, and sometimes it even stops being just inaction to be premeditated rest, and to be active moments of calmness, and just in the way in which we engage with all of those aspects of our own life, it is that we find out that actually our life is not so harsh, not so bad, and not so negative. But if we don't have that, if we don't get to experience that, then yes, it does become far worse, and it does feel far more negative in our own existence. And once we slowly get to recognize, yeah, this is where I was trying to go. Not only do I have these presumptions of, okay, I am going to feel better, but this is the fun reality of living in the modern world. We have a lot of evidence for stuff. Supposedly, once we start to integrate more in action, we end up finding out that, yeah, sometimes not having such high levels of stress help the body, help the mind, help our entire health in ways that makes us feel more capable of surviving the whole rest of our existence. Sometimes to have rest is to end up possessing in our hands a different tool to observe the world and to analyze situations that otherwise under pressure would have led us to take actions which would have been much more negative. It is in this existence of the inaction itself that the human gets to sort of purify itself. It's somehow by the process of not doing something, there is another side of us that gets slowly discarded. Not because it is absolutely unnecessary, but rather because we slowly just grow towards this different sort of being, which can recognize that not all the things which we have already attached to us, not all the ways in which we act, not all that is us, so to speak, is obliged to always remain in that position of us. And that's, I guess, the complicated aspect. Once again, that's what I always try to say with all of this. It is an internal process. I can't just describe it in a very indirect manner, but yeah, only if we get to realize that I actually need to calm down. Or maybe I don't need to. I just want to see what will happen. I just want to find out how this person who seems to glorify so much this thing that I have otherwise learned to perceive as one of the most dangerous and negative things to do or to fall into after not doing anything else, this thing might as well still be as horrible. And this one guy in this case might have just been wrong. Otherwise, there is the possibility maybe it isn't. And that is something that personally we have to experience and personally we have to discover. And that's where the fun starts. I think so. It's always, I don't know. I remember today having heard about one very interesting idea. In the process of reading something, for example, of seeing something that is enticing enough, the reader gets to eliminate a part of the self. I am not so much just me, and my own dialogue when I read what other person writes, because even if they are written in the first person singular of the first person in the most basic and most self-absorbed manner, no one gets to be me. So in that same sense, this idea of, and sometimes I can try out this stuff that I hear somebody say, wow, yeah, for me it was good. That's when I see. That's when I somehow realize, wow, yeah, it's useful. And all of that in this case is I might be capable of finding out in the process of, in this case, literally doing nothing. That's how much it means to sometimes be capable of including the nothingness itself onto life. It's something about, I guess, learning to be. besides that, because it's it's complicated. I always say that it's something sort of complicated and not exactly impossible to spell out, but it's just that also, you know what? You don't have inaction. You don't have those times in which not everything is going in your favor. The world is going to make you go crazy, man. What do you think would happen if you literally didn't have the capacity to stand around for a little bit? Sometimes, even if we personally are capable of doing everything that we want, the rest of the world isn't capable of allowing everything that we want to happen in the instant in which we want that. And it is in the cultivation of patience that we get to learn that also, yeah, in this thing that me, me as the person who is observing you, what I get to call inaction because it doesn't sit right with me, with my personal beliefs and what I have identified through my own biases as a negative thing, you are still doing something and you are still being able of enjoying your own existence in a way in which it matters to you. And that is, I guess, yeah, a still a self centered perception, but nonetheless a useful one, because sometimes that's also part of this discussion of, oh, yeah, you know what? Inaction is so bad always. No, no, it cannot be always bad. It cannot be acceptable that we literally never get to have a moment of calmness, never get to have a moment of tranquility and quote unquote low activity. It's not healthy. And it's not something that, oh, wow, yeah, yeah, I am saying it for the sake of saying it. I don't know actually. That's what I say. There is enough evidence of that already. High stress lives are much shorter lives. Higher stress existences lead to much worse actions being taken because of the pressure that we put in ourselves, or the pressure that we feel in our own life ends up even affecting the people that is around us in different ways. It's a phenomena that, yeah, is interesting, but it isn't interesting at the most basic level of analysis. There are some things that are nice about it, and that is why I say, yeah, it's something that needs to be properly observed. It's something that requires, I guess, meditation on what's the thing. And you know, how do you get to meditate on things? By actually not doing something else that could distract you from that. It is by allowing inaction in all other fronts. That then, yes, I can actually find myself doing something which I truly enjoy, which I truly want to do, and which I truly can say has given me productive or beneficial consequences, you know? It's, I think it is like that it works. I don't know. I would, tracing back, I do think inaction is, in some cases, bad, but I wouldn't say it's in every single instance bad. I think so. I don't know. And okay, let me continue. Sorry. Uh, I didn't even say that I was going to drink something. Let me continue. And I think not only it is something good. In this case, let me try to segue into the next topic, basically, to revisit something like this. Because at the end of the day, I said it before, there are way so many preconceptions that we end up carrying with us that sometimes we forget, yeah, not always is extremely bad. In all cases, in all instances, it doesn't need to be that way. In every, once again, in all cases, not always are things bad. Sometimes life is good and we just get overwhelmed by what we experience in our own life. But life in general can be good. It doesn't need to be such a problematic thing. And so, okay, how now? let me move on properly. Second topic, because you say, okay, what has that to do with this? In some cases, that's what I was trying to say before. In many instances, something funny is inaction leads to moments of contemplation, and in some ways, you do need to actually have nothing else going on to enter truly deep instances of observation of the existence which we carry ourselves, you know? And something funny that happens inside of that is, what do I actually wish? Is my every single human being has some sort of wish. The problem is, okay, what is it that I am actually wishing? If it is even that I am wishing something, as in anything at all. And it is inside of that to begin with anything, I think it's the funniest thing that suddenly, yeah, it's not in itself truly a fun thing. It's rather a completely depressing, but it's not so useful to just stay in the emotional emotional resistor of the idea. Because yeah, some people are completely disconnected from what they might ever feel. And because of that, there is a point in their own existence in which they end up realizing, I don't even know if I wish something for myself, if I wish stuff because other people say that it is the correct thing to wish, without observation of our own existence, of our own being. We don't get to define what is it that we, or what is it that I in a singular existence in my own self want. And how can I, okay, let's say it's understandable that I don't want to be selfish because I might do negative stuff if I just focus on my personal gratification and nothing else. Okay, then what are the things which I can try to aspire to wish to that are not only going to be good for me but also for those who I say that I care about, you know? That sort of stuff doesn't come if it isn't for the process of actual observing and the idea of I want to wish for a stuff isn't an eternally present thing in the human in the life of every single human. Why? Because yeah, even more so in current times, it shouldn't be such a crazy thing to picture that yeah, if I have to live a 9 to 5 life, if I have to always be worried with work and with doing the bare minimum to keep on surviving, what I mentioned before, if I never get to have moments of calmness, I might not have realized that I have lost all that was mine, all that I actually cared about, and I just started to live in a much more primal state. That, oh yeah, it is still not comparable to that one of, I don't know, uh, truly basic animal unlike us, because I don't know, I get to utilize my phone still and watch so much entertainment and blah 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 blah. All of that is true, exists, but it doesn't make it in essence still primal. That doesn't make it in essence still something that doesn't truly fulfill, so to speak, this aspect of the soul of the human being, you know? And in the act of wishing for a stuff, it is that we realize sometimes I actually have stuff that I care about, and yeah, it's also something tricky because the reality, what I have seen so far is wishing is an intrinsic part of actually possessing any kind of actual goal because you want stuff to happen, and in this case, not only do you want something to happen, not only, let's say like this, you can have a completely delusional wish. You can want, let's say, to win in your next um what is it, in the next time you play something like slots, you are going to become rich. That is to some degree certainly delusional, but in the other hand, you have stuff like, okay, I wish to, for example, the basic philosophical statement or example of eternity. I wish to be happy. Therefore, I am going to work myself towards that state in which I can secure, not just to myself, but to everyone who sees that I am indeed living a life of the utmost happiness, you know? And all of those things are beneficial, are useful, are necessary to consider. And once I identify that which I wish for, I can then finally start moving and start performing those actions which will enable me to not just stay in the stage of the wish, but to, so to speak, realize and materialize that which I say I want. That's the basic idea, as always. You can say that you wish for something, then you can slowly see if it is something that you can get by your own actions and not something that you just have to stay in the position of, oh wow, yeah, I don't know. I want to own a Tesla. Basic example is something along those lines. I want to own one of those incredibly technologically advanced cars of the latest years. One of those newest cars that has appeared. I want something like that. Okay, it's not just staying in the desire itself, it is also in the process of seeing how can I actually get something like that I get to feel better and that I get to actually do something for myself and do something for the sake of that which I say I wish to have or which I say I wish to actually accomplish, you know. And it's in the combination or in the combinatory of that process that the human gets to find a huge part of their own essence. If somebody stops wishing, is in many ways the same as somebody who has stopped living. Not because life is only the satisfaction of what I said before, not to remain in the level of I am just going to satisfy my instincts. You can also have wishes that go a little bit beyond that, but unavoidably, to never have any kind of wish at all is not beneficial neither. It's not a realistic stuff or a realistic enough conception of the way in which we want to act, so to speak. That's why I try to say wishing for stuff is good. Wishing for things to change is nice. But I guess yeah, in my case, it's a combination of the two things which I have been talking about thus far. It's not just only about wishing, but also being able of, once I see what I wish for, seeing how can I utilize the time in which I can be active to accomplish that wish and to gain that wish and to make it real, you know? Otherwise, yeah, I might just end up falling myself onto one of those many instances of utterly destructive things and not much more. So, I don't know. It's, let's say like this, something to actually consider. But otherwise, it's it's not so bad if we let it if we let it not be a part of us. Because I think, based on what I have seen thus far, it seems to be a very real aspect of life. Unavoidably, as long as everything else is given, the person who isn't capable of wishing for something, but who can keep on living, finds themselves at one point or another unequivocally once again wishing for stuff. Because that is part of the human nature. Not to always want anything, but actually that, yeah. because I can think, because I can utilize my time in the stuff that I say I want and such. Sometimes I start to create hopes for the future, create an interest in the stuff that I can think about and such. Unavoidably, all of that is, I wouldn't say loaded, but charged with some unmentioned notions like, yeah, certainly the person has to live in an environment in which it is facilitated to them everything so that they can then have a sustainable enough life so that they can start living, start wishing, start aiming towards something without being corrupted by everything else around them. The capacity to aspire towards any wish, any goal, any desire is not so important in itself, in the void of its own self contained existence, but rather in the reality and okay, and thus also all the other stuff that surrounds that allow it to happen, or are we saying that it is something that should happen without truly possessing anything that allows those things which we want to see be? If we don't get to have stuff that actually allows and enables, so to speak, or wishes to become real, then it's truly, once again, yeah, is a pointless action and leads to only even worse states of feelings because I realize that no matter what I want, I cannot ever get to that. But at the same time, I would say I don't think it is that much of an unrealistic statement. Being here already means that to some degree we're already capable of at least considering what is it that we wish. Otherwise, if this wasn't done out of the desire of just doing what we want, in essence, this at all wouldn't be happening in any of the both sides in which any sort of event like this one gets to exist, you know? So yeah, it can be true that not having at all the capacity to wish is bad, but I don't know how much losing ourselves in the pain of those who don't get to wish at all for anything actually impacts people like us who actually can do it. Let's say like this: it is a sort of not proper argument, but you know what? Yeah, if that helps you feel better, do it. Do it. Wish for stuff for the sake of those who can't ever wish for anything. Have hopes, have dreams for those in the place of those who never got the capacity, who got the time, who got the life to ever aspire towards anywhere. If that makes you, if that allows you to do that, then do it. In this case, the point is to wish for stuff, to have hope in any way. I wouldn't say that they are such completely disassociated ideas. To wish, to have hope for stuff is something that the human needs, you know? And now, let me drink some water. Thank you. Wait, I have just realized, I think I have been a student for like a good enough amount of time, and something crazy that I have seen is, I think only once or twice I saw my professors leave to go to the bathroom. That's something crazy. How do they do that? How do they manage to actually never leave in the middle of a class? Is it like an internal clock or something? Being accustomed to not leaving? I never actually thought about that. That's crazy. Anyways, sorry. let me start with the last one. We we only have one thing to talk about, and after that, we will be liberated. So, um, there is this thing. This is the third idea, the third one, the third part, the hidden secret option that is above me, called everlasting tools. I guess this isn't such a complicated concept as it sounds without any other context, because the idea is things that would help us for our entire life, basically. That's a longer explanation of that, basically. Not exactly everlasting, as in eternally reminiscent in this world once we create them, like, I don't know, an indestructible object that we can make that will be given to others and passed down from generation to generation until the universe collapses onto itself. No, it's more along the lines of something that personally helps me throughout my whole life. I do think, okay, in initial caveat, it is sort of hard to think about this properly because unavoidably all of us are prone to change. We find ourselves affected by the stuff that happens around us. We find ourselves moved by events that impact us enough, even if they are not so directly related to anything bad. Sometimes something good enough can also change us, you know? There are many of those things in our own existence, and it is through the realization of those that, yeah, we get to see. It's harder to actually identify one thing which is utterly everlasting. But despite that, accepting that it is true that, yeah, we change, there are still some more basic elements that don't need to modify themselves so much. There are a more basic level of, so to speak, ideas that can be eternally helpful for us. And that is what I don't like so much, because not because they exist, but rather because they don't get discussed as much, sadly. We're not so capable of actually saying, stating, realizing, accepting that, yeah, I don't know, everyone has the right, the capacity, and the necessity also to learn about their own health, learn about their own state of being, so to speak. And that can be always good. That is, that is, I remember having heard it in this way. Once I get to understand how I work, even if the problem might arise only once or twice, just because I understood what I saw about my own possible future self, I can be far better. Also, good evening, Castor. I hope you're well. Hi, Castor. Welcome. And yeah, I don't know. What the question is, what are we doing? And the answer is, we are chatting. That is, I don't know, most of what we do here. It's literally everything that we do here, actually. So, welcome. But yeah, the point is, what are we talking about? That is the next question. We're actually talking about, I guess, things that help us, probably. That's the most basic way to see it, something along those lines. That's at least, yeah, how I like to think about it, I guess. But yeah, um, the concept, we, so far it is on this stage of I realize that I can do stuff for my own self. I realize that I can learn about the stuff, and I realize that some pieces of knowledge are always useful. And that is the craziest thing, not only for my own self. There are also some other things that are good for anyone that I get to know. Like, for example, I don't know, something that is I guess viral, mainstream, if not viral, something like CPR has become popular enough so that we all understand how useful that tool is. And those sort of pieces of knowledge exist throughout the whole of our own existence, so to speak. And I think sadly, my point is, sadly, I think it's not so common that we find ourselves talking about actually investing time in trying to see, realize, accept, integrate, and once again keep on working in adding and making sure that we have enough of those things which make us feel better. Because if that were to be the case, if actually all of us were making sure that we gain more tools for our own benefit, not everyone will be in so much suffering. And yeah, I don't need the whole thesis of, oh no, yeah, what you don't understand, this world tires people out. This world drains you, it drains you of your essence, kills you slowly, insidiously. This world is such a dark place, such a tiresome place. You cannot, you don't have time to settle down and learn about anything that you want because this world kills you slowly. No, I understand that. I have heard that enough times. But personally, I guess one of the many tools of freeing tools, I guess, that you can find out is how to slowly manage your own existence so that it doesn't find itself to be so tormental. It's possible to actually do stuff that helps you while also having an incredibly busy life. It's both things are not utterly self-exclusive of the other one. You know, it's I don't think exactly so complicated. It's just that sometimes those I guess I remember this idea of the by our human nature we are quite incapable of living with so many contradictions within ourselves. So the norm then becomes, you know what, I can't actually withstand knowing that I have to do something for my own self, that I have to keep on growing, so to speak, in for the sake of feeling better on one hand. On the other one, even if I can, if my life tires me out enough, I might not actually be capable of doing so. Therefore, do I actually need to do that so much? And in those instances, it slowly then, yes, becomes more of a silent, almost invisible transformation from maybe it isn't as important. Maybe it isn't something that I actually need to do, you know? Maybe it isn't something that I need to care about. It's those tiny concessions that make us realize how weird it is to exist, I guess. Those moments in which we surrender, even if it isn't an actual necessity, we find ourselves having given up on stuff for different reasons that maybe we can't consciously or instantaneously identify, and it's fine. I think that's something funny about that is, yeah, as long as I can see that happening, I also get the benefit of realizing that I can try to do something about that, and that's good enough. At least for me, that's good enough, I think. But now, okay, let me finish that actually. I didn't in itself say so much about the proper thing of gathering those mm, category of everlasting tools. What is something that will help us for the rest of our existence? Okay, inside of that category, as I said before, there are some certain types of knowledge that we slowly get to identify as useful and we get to keep for the rest of our life. And I tried to say something very brief before. It doesn't mean that an everlasting tool is actually something that will be useful for everyone throughout the wholeness of existence. The most important aspect is, yeah, something that works for me as long as I am alive. That is a proper, quote unquote, everlasting tool because it will last my whole existence. That's as much as I should actually care about. Because, and that is another caveat onto the caveat, if I needed to survive, I cannot actually worry about every single thing that is not me, besides my own self. I need to, at the very least, see my own existence as something valuable. And after that, yeah, I can slowly enough worry about other stuff. Maybe, yeah, I don't know. Let's say like this: you slowly grow to be a better person, and you realize how to handle things in a more beneficial manner. Let's say, and then you can slowly see that, yeah, actually being alive is not so hard once I get to fulfill the stuff that I want in my own existence. Then at some point it can also come as another realization, okay, I am doing everything that I personally want. How, what are the things that I can do that make me happy, that can also assist someone else in achieving that same level of happiness? And that is then, yes, at that instance, it becomes a different category. The symbol of an everlasting tool resignifies itself. I identify that slowly the things which worked for me don't just have to work for me and for no one else. I can also see if the things that work for me can work for other people, and that is a further development of the idea. But that is at that stage, I will say, more complicated than what we actually need to see to some degree, because I will say so. As somebody who might be overly optimistic, yeah, I think the people are prone to realize that uh, an existence in which only I matter becomes quite devoid of other types of enjoyment. Once you slowly get to place in their proper place the value of others within your own life, then you get to see that, yes, I can also allow myself to do stuff for them. But you cannot enforce that realization if you don't have the capacity to ever wonder about that yourself. I don't know, I don't think it's all that crazy, I guess. But who knows? Now, that's. I think that is the last topic, I guess. I I didn't try to actually rush anything. I don't know why did we go through everything so rapidly, I guess. It's just that the ideas sometimes, as I said it before, something crazy that has happened is to see that, yeah, expressivity is not such a complicated part of life. You can actually see and you can actually make it work in your favor. You can get to say things that you want once you learn to talk in general, and that has been the same case here. Crazily enough, yeah, it's possible for us to be talking about stuff not so indirectly. Ideas are addressable once you understand what you are actually interested in addressing. But yeah, I guess it's fine. Anyways, it's part of our own life, so I cannot complain. I don't know. Let me drink water, I guess. So yeah, with that being said, I guess that has been it probably today. I I don't know how much I prefer in that case to not overextend it. let's say. Not yet. We time is far more incomprehensible than what we can actually realize sometimes. And yeah, in this case, I would rather not overextend or welcome just for the sake of saying more stuff that might even occlude the actual message. So yeah, I think I'm happy with this. I I think that has been it today. Thank you. And also yeah, we will see what happens next time, as in probably tomorrow. I don't know. In the near future something will happen. As in yeah, tomorrow. But that's for future me to worry about actually. So yes. Thank you. I don't know. I guess let me say like this. Living a busy life can also have a lot of downtimes, but it is in the essence of actually living the life that makes it work, even if it is full of things. It's crazy that somehow we have lost the capacity to identify that, yeah, it's good to actually do stuff that we want. It is demon- demonization, I think it is the expression of learning to not be always pleasing oneself, but just making oneself happy has made so much ourselves miserable, and I think it can be fixed. It should be worth to be fixed actively. But yeah, anyways, the point is, I don't have anything else to add. Thank you. See you next time, I guess. And if there is no next time, it has been still a wonderful occasion. Thank you. Thank you for the patience, for the interest, for everything. And yeah, until until up to this is how far we get today, I guess. Have a good night. Have a nice night. And yeah, take care, please. Be happy, be responsible, and all of those things. Thank you very much.